The Newberry Library exhibition, Mapping Outside the Lines, showcases how map makers have developed a wide variety of lines to bring our world to life. The exhibition features dozens of diagrams, drawings, engravings, and lithographs, the majority from the Newberry's map collections, which number in the hundreds of thousands. Mapping Outside the Lines is free, open to all, and runs through February 14th, 2026 at the Newberry Library. For more information, visit newberry.org. Every Chicagoan knows the Loop means business, and membership with the Chicago Loop Alliance can connect you with the powerful network of leaders and innovators helping shape the city's most visible district. As a member, you'll gain access to marketing opportunities, news, events, and neighborhood initiatives to highlight your business. Plus, you can make meaningful connections with peers, partners, and community stakeholders. Get connected at loopchicago.com/join. Make sure you stay tuned after the interview for a quick conversation sponsored by the Harris Theater with composer Steve Hackman about his upcoming show, Beethoven Beyonce. Today on CityCast Chicago, are CTA and Metro prices going up or not? The future of Chicago's downtown Greyhound terminal, and are these baby bulls really real? It's Friday, November 7th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I'm joined today by our friends from Block Club Chicago. We got Manny Ramos in the building. Manny, good to see you, my friend.
Good being here again. Nice seeing you.
We've also got Quinn Myers back. It's good to have you in the building, Quinn.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into the big stories from the week, I got a question for y'all. On Monday, we dropped our guide to November. We were kind of talking about some things we are excited about, even as all of us are constantly covering a little bit of confusion and chaos across Chicago neighborhoods. So I wanted to bring y'all in here. Quinn, what is something you are looking forward to in November that's not the holidays?
Well, whenever it gets cold out in Chicago, I like going to the sauna, specifically the Chicago Bathhouse on Division Street in Wicker Park. Highly recommend checking it out. If you can hit the sauna, then do a cold plunge and repeat that a couple times, you feel amazing. Then you go upstairs to the restaurant and get some like pickled vegetables and, different Russian food. It's a bit of a scene there. So it's pretty fun, pretty interesting, unique Chicago place. So I'm going to start hitting that up. I think this weekend, you can get a 10 pass. Is usually what I do for the season. Basically, once you can't swim in the lake anymore, then I hit the sauna.
Mm-hmm. I actually did a sauna, cold plunge, and then did a little salt float a couple of weeks ago. And man, I wish I could afford to do them all. I can't. But hey, once there is good enough for me. It was nice.
It's not too expensive at the bathhouse on Division Street. I think if you get, it's like,
that's good to know.
It's $30 a pop, I think. So if you go sparingly, it's not too bad.
Manny, what about you? What's something you're looking forward to this month?
My favorite thing in November is taking long walks with the weather as it's sort of like nice and brisk and cold. You get that cold air in your lungs. You get to sort of like think and just process everything that's going around you. So I just love taking long walks during this month and just soaking in the leaves changing and seeing the decorations, whether it's people leaving their Halloween decorations up too long or Thanksgiving changing. So it's always fun.
Mm-hmm. And I'm already seeing the Christmas decorations popping up early as hell. Man, I love a good long walk. And yesterday I got one in, and my path for maybe like 3 blocks was just like crunchy leaves. And I felt like I was 8 years old again. I was about 30 seconds away from just like jumping up and down and finding a pile of leaves and just like going head first. But no, a good sauna and a good long walk. I appreciate y'all being here this morning. Let's jump into some of the big stories that's happening this week. Earlier, we broke down some of the major line items in the $1.5 billion transit bill that Springfield lawmakers voted through in the middle of the night on Halloween morning. Manny, I got 2 major questions out the gate for you. One, we didn't answer for listeners whether or not those fare increases that Metro and CTA announced were still going to be happening in February. And 2, now that you've sat with the bill for almost a week, what are your biggest takeaways from this entire process and 2 a.m., 4 a.m. final agreement?
Yeah, so there's good news in terms of the fare increase. RTA has sort of pumped the brakes a little bit on whether or not these increases are going to go through. They said they're supposed to make their full decision on later on Thursday, I believe. But at the moment, with this bill, there was a stipulation in there that there couldn't be any fare increases for at least a year once the bill takes effect, which happens June 1st of 2026. So theoretically, they could have extended or increased those fares now until then. But with pushback from lawmakers, RTA is sort of taking a heat approach, and they're going to further discuss whether or not they're going to do that. So in the moment, it's kind of paused the discussion, but it's still kind of up in the air on what they would ultimately decide to do.
And then overall, as you've sat with this bill for a little bit, I mean, some of the things weren't really big shockers, like, them moving towards the Northern Illinois Transit Authority. That's something we heard all the way back in the spring. Were there anything shocking for you? Have you learned anything new about this, or is it a, for all practical purposes, pretty straightforward package?
For about 2 years now, we've been reporting on the fiscal cliff, right? It was a large $771 million gap that, these agencies couldn't fill. Somehow or another, they were able to sort of dwindle that down to just over $200 million. So this has been looming over the region for a long time. And I think it's really significant that the transit system was able to sort of get $1.5 billion funding package, right? Like, this is a huge investment in transit in the region. And I don't think that should be minimized in any way. The fact that they're also doing it by not generating any kind of, new sales tax, right? I know there was a big pushback against sort of like entertainment sales tax and Netflix tax and all of this stuff that was sort of floating around before this passage of the bill. But we're talking about, a sales tax on motor fuel that expects to bring $860 million, with 85% of that going to NETA. And now RTA also is allowed to sort of vote to increase its own sales tax by 0.25%, and also force region players to not use that money to redirect it to law enforcement agencies, as some of the collar counties were doing. This is a huge funding package for it, and it also provides some of the restructuring that I'm sure you guys already talked about, with replacing RTA with a more stronger oversight board at NETA, and also restructuring CTA specifically, since we are focused on Chicago here. It gives the Cook County Board a seat on there to sort of change the power dynamics. It's a very large bill that is encompassing, and I'm still going through everything.
Feels like when we're talking budget crisis, whether at the state level, local, we're always like plugging holes for now that, reveal holes down the road. And as we were talking through this process, there were forecasted budget gaps for the next couple of years. Does this bill set us up for like long-term sustainability, or is this just a fixing the problem now and we'll have to kick this bucket down the road?
This has been advertised as a way to set up long-term sustainability. I mean, this is the exact dollar amount that these agencies were looking for when we're talking about CTA, Metra, and PACE combined with RTA. They were all looking for this $1.5 billion figure to make them sustainable. Whether or not they're going to keep that promise, I mean, it's all bureaucratic nonsense. A new gap comes up every other year, but for this specific process, this is the exact dollar amount that they were looking for sustainability. So this doesn't seem like a piecemeal approach, but a more restructuring approach that gets funding to where it's needed.
It's interesting, though, they did scrap some of the revenue ideas that were initially proposed, like the billionaires tax, which would have been on unrealized capital gains for really rich people. So I think it speaks to a larger kind of tension in Springfield. We hear the Mayor Brandon Johnson, talking about needing to raise progressive revenue, basically taxing the rich all the time. That's kind of his main talking point when it comes to revenue. And we haven't really seen the willingness to do that from the governor or from the state house, certainly to the extent that some progressives would like to see. So I thought that was an interesting thing that got cut out, kind of proposed and then cut out at the last minute here.
Moving into a different part of Chicago's transit apparatus, Quinn, last time we talked, Chicago's major Greyhound terminal downtown that serves thousands and thousands of people annually, its future was pretty unclear. Ultimately, I believe a lease was signed and it was sort of saved for another day. But now that I'm hearing the city may step in a broader way, what's going on?
Yeah, so this is the Greyhound station on Harrison Street, kind of on the edge of the loop downtown. It doesn't just serve Greyhound. There are multiple bus lines that, basically lease space there. And this is the intercity bus terminal. So if you want to take a bus to Minneapolis or, somewhere else in the Midwest, and you can connect basically to anywhere around the country, this is where you go for the most part. So it's really important transit area node for Chicago. I've taken it a couple of times, but it really is important. Seniors take the bus, lower income people. Lots of people have been taking the bus to Illinois for reproductive health care that they can't get in other Midwestern states. So this is like a really vital service in the city. And for years now, it's been in flux over some lease disputes about the future. And basically a year ago, it looked like it might even close down and basically force buses to pick up people and drop off on the curb somewhere. One area was suggested near Union Station, which Amtrak pushed back on, I think rightfully so, saying this would be a nightmare if you're doing this, just traffic-wise. There was also all this construction going on over there. So basically, what's happening now is the city has allocated over the next couple of years up to $50 million in tax increment financing dollars to purchase and rehab the Greyhound bus facility on Harrison Street. This is a big deal. I mean, this would be a municipally owned bus station that they would then lease out to bus companies, possibly bringing in more revenue. I'm not sure exactly what the revenue numbers look like. This is super preliminary. And no one really even knew about it outside of, City Hall until this week when Alderman Bill Conway happened to stumble upon this line item going through TIF reports and then basically brought it up during a budget hearing and then started talking to reporters about it. So we don't really know how this will work, but the mayor's office did confirm this week, yes, we are going to purchase it. We're going to rehab it. This is a vital piece of Chicago infrastructure and we need to do this. But that's pretty much all we know at this point.
Mm-hmm. And when I said thousands earlier, what I really meant, it serves 500,000 people annually. Is Conway's biggest point of contention that he wasn't talked to about this, that he's finding out about it very late? And also to that point, alders kind of come in and say that often, like, this guy by me, no one consulted me. Is that really the case? Or is this they weren't paying attention or they dropped the ball type of situation?
In this case, I do think that he was not consulted by the mayor's office about this pretty massive infrastructure plan in his ward. And especially, spending $50 million in TIF, which, is in some ways separate from the budget picture, although it is connected and we don't have to get into all that, how they, sweep TIF districts to put it into the city budget and all that. But basically, I think he's saying, I should have been consulted. I should have been, in these meetings as you guys progress on buying this major property in my ward. I also think for years, Conway hasn't been the biggest fan of having this station in his ward. It has attracted a few high-profile crimes. People hang out outside the Greyhound station. I do think it doesn't totally sit in his wealthy ward the way maybe he would want to see it, or others, some of his residents, some of his constituents. But again, this has been there since the 80s. It is a vital piece of infrastructure in Chicago. So I think, last year, activists and transit advocates were pushing the city to buy the station.
This is exactly what they wanted.
Exactly. And the city at the time said they looked into it. It was unfeasible. Something behind the scenes changed. Now they're moving forward. It hasn't been closed. They're still in the process of going through all the motions on this. And then we don't know what the rehab will look like, how long that will take. This station has been, it's over, it's 40 years old. We don't know what's basically going on inside. Is that going to cost millions and millions of dollars? Maybe so. Like they have tens of millions of dollars to look into that, to put towards that. So other than that, we're kind of waiting to see when the real estate deal goes through, and then city council is likely going to have to approve this TIF allocation. So that could be a whole battle. I guess we'll see where Conway and some other aldermen end up on this.
Manny, we have been covering very closely the ongoing terror campaign the federal government has unleashed on our city by way of ICE and Border Patrol, parading around Chicago, kidnapping folks from daycares and bus stops and hospitals. You decided to follow some of the money surrounding these authoritarian operations. And Manny, where did that lead you exactly?
Yeah, so we looked at sort of the government contracts that are being awarded in the months leading up to Operation Midway Blitz, as well as throughout the entire process. And what we found is a few Chicago area companies have benefited greatly from this operation. And it should be said they've made millions of dollars while, local small mom and pop businesses have been struggling and afraid to even open their doors at times. What we learned is that there's this downtown based real estate company company that made over $7.4 million moving ICE agents across the country and into Chicago, in the months leading up to Operation Midway Blitz. And it's interesting also that contract ended the same day that DHS announced that this operation was going to be taking place. We also learned that United Tactical Systems, a company that provides non-lethal weapons to federal agents, so primarily air-powered guns and those pepper balls that you've seen them, shoot at protesters, at journalists, and at just people who are standing by. The first 2 weeks of Operation Midway Blitz, especially on the days that it really intensified, that company made about $1.45 million providing these pepper balls to federal agents. And they're just, one of about nearly a dozen of businesses within the Chicago area that has saw their contracts increase. Specifically, we're looking at, Invisio Communications, which is a European operated company, but has their, United States headquarters is in Chicago. They were providing federal agents with those tactical headsets that you see them wearing, and they were awarded almost $400,000 for that contract. And the contracts vary. Not all of them were that high. We reported on a Southwest Side company that was providing pizza ovens and flat top griddles to Border Patrol, and for about $34,000. As these operations was going on, as agents were invading communities and detaining folks, there were some businesses that were benefiting greatly from these operations.
The type of figures we're talking about, like the hundreds of thousands of dollars that people are taking in to see their community members be violated every single day, to be terrorized, to be smoked and choked out in their neighborhoods. It goes without saying what people will do for a dollar bill, the ways that they'll turn a blind eye to make a dollar.
And it is unfortunate, though, that none of the companies wanted to speak with us for this story. We did get one company, the one who provided those pizza ovens. Their position was they don't have any say or control over the federal government's operations, whatever they may be, and they don't have any say on where the materials they're shipping gets placed or sent to. So kudos on them for at least speaking with us, but it's unfortunate the others chose not to.
I think, as we've said time and time again over the last few weeks, we know where local businesses are struggling in and around the city. And when and where you can, if you can, step in, buy a meal, purchase something from a local vendor, just stop in and show your presence in a small business in the many communities that's being impacted, to kind of help lift people's spirits, because people are living in constant fear. I think the thing that is lifting people up and carrying people on is the fact that they have seen that their neighbors are willing to be there for them in this time of crisis. November is Homelessness Awareness Month. Now, most of us know homelessness is a problem in Chicago. We see our neighbors sleeping in parks and bus stations, and we want to help. That's why in November, Deborah's Place is focused on raising awareness about what actually works. Permanent housing, not just overnight shelter, paired with supportive services. At Deborah's Place, that model, permanent supportive housing, has helped thousands of women find paths towards stability. When we can provide housing paired with necessary resources, our communities become safer and more livable for all Chicagoans. So learn more about events in the community and how you can support Deborah's Place at deborahsplace.org. 2026 will be here sooner than you think, which means it's already election season, my friends. And Chicago needs election judges for the March 17th primary. As an election judge, you'll help your neighbors cast their votes by setting up polling stations and answering voter questions. The requirements are you have to be a U.S. citizen and registered voter in Cook County. And if you also speak Spanish, Hindi, Polish, Korean, Chinese, or Tagalog, then they definitely need your help. Earn up to $230 and help your community on Election Day. Plus, high school juniors and seniors can also apply. So if you know a student with a 3.0 GPA and an interest in civics, then let them know. Head to pollworker.chicagoelections.gov or call 312-269-7984. Quinn, earlier this week, you covered a press conference featuring librarians, library advocates, and alders who voiced concerns about the future of Chicago Public Library System's budget for next year. Can you walk us through the budget proposals and their worries?
Yeah, and so this has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit in the larger budget conversations about head taxes and social media taxes, and basically the kind of horse race sparring that we're seeing between a lot of aldermen and the mayor's office at this point. But the Chicago Public Library, like many departments, is proposed to cut a bunch of vacant positions. Basically, this is how the mayor's budget team is trying to avoid layoffs of active employees. They're saying, well, if you have vacant positions, we're going to cut as many as we can that we budgeted for last year. They're not currently filled to save money next year. So the library is facing a proposed 69-person headcount cut of vacant positions. This is across the system, clerks, librarians, different roles in various places. But perhaps more notably, there is a significant decrease proposed in what is known as their collections budget. This is the fund that basically the library uses to buy new books, pay for subscriptions, access databases, really the core stuff of what the library offers. And the proposal for that is to go from $10 million annually to $5 million next year. So yeah, the library union, AFSCME 1215, held a press conference on Tuesday and said, this is unacceptable. This is going to hurt how we serve Chicagoans. And, libraries, as you guys know, as I'm sure every listener knows, are really vital community resources, not just to go get a new novel or a book, but to use the printer, right? To references, apply for jobs, immigration forms. These are some of the most vital public-facing services that the city offers. So that's basically what they're saying. And the mayor's office is kind of responding, saying, we have to do this. This is a really tight budget year. And basically, we don't want to close any library branches. They're saying that the library fund, which is backed by the library's property tax levy, is not meeting basically expenses. So they have to kind of find some ways to be creative here. All in all, though, we're only talking about between the collections budget cut and the staffing cuts to these vacant positions, we're talking about a little less than $10 million total. If the library got $10 million more, they could keep their collections budget where it is. And then the library commissioner, Chris Brown, during a budget hearing the other day, said 69 vacant positions, that's going to be about $4.46 million. So put those two together, $10 million. It's a lot of money to any of us, but in grand scheme of things, of billions of dollars that the city spends, especially on policing, police overtime, it's a little hard for me to believe that they can't find an extra $10 million in the couch cushions somewhere. Heather Schrein at TTW, she's been reporting doggedly on how much CPD spends on every year over their budget. She had a report out this week that saw that CPD overspent its budget every year for the past couple of years since 2019, except 2020 during the pandemic. A lot of that is overtime that goes to CPD. And then we have the whole other bucket of police misconduct payouts, right, for lawsuits that come into the city. So I think a lot of these librarians are saying, really, we can't find $10 million here to at least maintain services. They want to see more because they believe the library is already understaffed and already not getting the funding it needs to. So this is in some ways small potatoes, but for Chicagoans who rely on these services, it could be a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say this year alone, I visited, about a half dozen to a dozen libraries across the city of Chicago and sat down with librarians and asked them about some of their biggest challenges. And more times than not, it goes back to funding and staffing. And they are being as creative as possible, from some of the smallest branches to the largest ones in our city. Like you said, not only providing those resources people can kind of quickly think of, but it's, the team programs that take place there, the childcare programs that take place in the library, the food drives. It's where people who are unhoused can go throughout the day to access resources, to get out of the elements, especially as it's starting to get a little bit colder and colder outside. And we know where we're headed. And so, like you said, when we're in a budget season and we're being told every single day we ain't got no money, but we're watching, sort of where the city's priorities ultimately lay. $10 million to a library budget that's already seen cuts and hour changes over the last few years. Right. It feels like it feels like beyond the bare minimum to ask for.
And, there was some discussion at this budget hearing after this press conference I went to about raising the property tax levy that the library, uses to fund its operations for the most part. And there seemed to be a pretty wide range of support for that, which was interesting, but also surprising because a lot of aldermen, whenever they hear property tax increase, they run for the hills, right? So I think now some of the budget realities for a lot of city council members are continuing to sink in. I heard some people who are definitely been outspoken against property taxes in the past, hikes, saying, well, maybe we should look at least tweaking this levy so we can bring in more money to the library. Let's do it right now. So I thought that was interesting as people kind of start to really grapple with this and try to find ways to maybe not see these cuts. So we'll be keeping an eye on it, and we'll see. The budget is always fluid, and money gets reallocated all the time before a final deal is put together. So they could see more money. We'll see.
Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends the exact same way, and that is with me politely asking you to bring your ass back for the next episode. But, before I do all of that, some good news. Manny, you got any good news for us this week?
It's been a great sports October, and I'm just looking to push that into November. Bulls 6-1, watching the Bulls, this month and going into Christmas, I'm just really excited for. Wasn't expecting this. It's been a nice surprise. Kobe White's not even in the games yet, so I'm looking forward to Bulls basketball being fun again. Even if they probably won't be able to maintain this winning streak in a lot of ways, I still feel like it's going to be a really fun team to watch.
November can often be the month that breaks all of your hopes across football and basketball. But again, to even have a moment where you can just say we the number one seed is ours, solely ours for just, even if it's just a couple of days, it's ours, right? The comeback against the 76ers on Tuesday, the kind of energy they play with. Most games has had a different leading scorer. Yeah, it's been cool to see a young team that has largely been counted out play for one another. And as I said at the beginning of the season, win, lose, or draw, the UC gonna be packed. It has the most loyal fan base in the country. Tonight, at the time people are listening to this, I think they're gonna have one of the toughest challenges to date against that first matchup against Giannis and the Bucks. And so it's also an NBA Cup game, and it's on the road at 7:00. And so let's see what happens. Let's see if we can keep this energy going. I wonder, are they real? Are they real? It's starting to look like maybe just a little bit. Maybe just a little bit.
I'll tell you, I really like that Buzelis kid. I think he's nice.
We was kind of talking about this at my sister's wedding, and we was all going back and forth. And I was like, "No, man, I believe in him. I believe in him." And people were just like, "Nah, we've seen this before." I was like, "No, we haven't. No, we haven't. This energy may be a little bit different." And if we compare Bulls win, or maybe a little Bears win, come on, we playing the Giants. Come on, we playing the Giants at home. That should be easy money sniper. Quinn, you got some good news for us today?
Yeah, this summer and fall in Wicker Park, they started a pilot program called Meet Me on Milwaukee. It was 3 Sundays, and they closed a stretch of Milwaukee kind of in the heart of Wicker Park to cars and buses for 7 hours on 3 Sundays. And people kind of flocked to the street. I talked to the Chamber of Commerce, who was one of the organizers. The first event, they saw triple the foot traffic. The next 2, they saw double. And basically, a lot of the businesses I talked to were saying, this is great. We saw, Sundays can be a little slower retail-wise, and we saw a boost from people walking around. And also there's just this novelty of walking down Milwaukee Avenue, one of the most congested thoroughfares in Chicago, and being like, I'm just in the middle of the street. There aren't delivery trucks or cars trying to zip past me. Felt safe. It felt fun. So the news is they are going to bring that back in some form next year, at least the amount of Sundays they had this year, possibly more. They're kind of working that out. And organizers are saying it was a big success. And I think we might start seeing more of these pedestrianization efforts around Chicago. People, when I first reported on this happening, they were like, do Clark Street in Andersonville, do 53rd Street in Hyde Park, like close it to cars, find these retail corridors and try it out and see how the impact is and what businesses think. At least in Wicker Park, it seems to have been a pretty big success.
I love these events. I like stopping by when they shut down the streets. I am going to round us out today. And again, I want to show some love to my friends over at Deeply Rooted Dance Theater, who tonight are opening their 30th anniversary. This company has uplifted Black dance in this city for decades now, has put so many young dancers in a position to pursue their love and their craft. One of their choreographers and leader, Joshua Eastman, gave me a shot some years ago to put up a play at the MCA. And it was one of the coolest opportunities and really sent me down the path I find myself on now. And so I got so much love to for their entire team. They're opening up at the Logan Center for the Arts tonight and tomorrow, but they also got some cool events planned for next year at the Wentz Concert Hall out in the burbs. They're going to be at the Auditorium Theater next year. And so I'll drop a link in the show notes for people, but it is one of the most exciting companies and shows you can see. So if you got some time, show them some love. I want to show some love to y'all for making time for CityCast Chicago. From Block Club, Quinn Myers, thank you for making time today.
Thank you so much. It was really fun.
And Manny Ramos, always a good time when you stop by, my friend.
Always great. Looking forward to the next.
As promised up top, we got a quick conversation sponsored by the Harris Theater about Beethoven Beyonce.
Hey, it's CityCast Chicago executive producer Simone Alicea, and I'm here with composer Steve Hackman. We're going to talk about a show that brings together two icons you would never expect, or you might not expect, Beethoven and Beyonce. The Harris Theater and Chicago Philharmonic, along with Steve, are all teaming up for a one-night fusion of Symphony No. 7 and Beyonce's biggest hits. It's part symphony, part dance party on November 20th at Millennium Park. Steve, welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Hello, Simone. Thank you so much.
So this fusion of Beethoven and Beyonce sounds wild and perfect. What on earth connects these two musicians across the centuries?
This piece kind of started because I had a wild dream about a music festival like a Lollapalooza that was unbounded by time. So the greatest composers of all time could be playing in the same festival grounds and collaborating with the great artists of today. I woke up from that dream thinking, what a crazy concept that is. And I started to wonder, like, who would the artist be? And then the eventual question was who would the marquee artist be, like top of the billing? And Beethoven and Beyonce, like, just kind of jumped into my mind as like the respective king and queen of their genres. So that's kind of how the idea first came to be.
As I understand, the show celebrates and elevates the power of women. Can you talk about how that theme shows up on stage through the music and the performers as well?
Oh, wow. Well, it absolutely does. I mean, I think it of course starts with who Beyonce is as an artist and the many facets of her womanhood. And this is an absolute celebration of that. And the three guest vocalists that you'll see on the stage, Brooke Simpson, Malia Civets, and Brayla Cook, I think they all embody sort of different sides of Beyonce, you know, and it's a tribute to how superhuman Beyonce is that it takes three mere mortals, you know, to realize that. But these are stunning, stellar vocalists. Beyonce's power, her soulfulness, her independence, her beauty, confidence, determination, like those all come through. And I think, like I said, Brayla, Brooke, and Malia each kind of embody different elements of that.
Steve, who are some of the other soloists that we can expect to hear?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, we've got our three phenomenal guest vocalists, Malia Civets, Brooke Simpson, and Brayla Cook. But then you've got the band. And I think what makes these fusion productions so authentic is that on both sides, we're realizing this music in such a world-class and high-level way. You know, you, of course, have the Chicago Philharmonic playing this Beethoven symphony just like a subscription classical concert. But then in the band, I mean, Gosh, Nick Clark, our bass player, is John Batiste, music director. Tayron Lockett, our drummer, is Corey Henry's drummer. And then Andrew Lipke, who's coming to play keyboards and guitar as well, is just an incredible multifaceted musician, conductor, arranger, songwriter himself. So a lot of star power on that stage.
So with all this in mind, Steve, who do you think is the audience for this show?
I know who the audience is because we've been performing these fusion pieces. I have a catalog of these productions, Beethoven Beyonce just being one of the newest. And the audience is on both sides, truly. It's, of course, going to be Beyonce fans that are interested to see her music reimagined in this way, that are interested to see it sort of elevated to the symphony stage, maybe hoping for an experience that kind of shines a new light on the music or just deepens their already robust connection. But then on the other side, it's similar. It's your classical music fans, your fans of Beethoven's, your fans of the Chicago Philharmonic that maybe are interested in seeing what's next for this classical art form.
For someone who's never been to a performance like this before, what should they expect when they walk into Harris Theater in Millennium Park on November 20th? Are they expecting more symphony hall or more dance party?
Well, they're going to get both. That's a promise. That's an absolute promise. If the audience in Chicago is anything like I expect it to be, there will be a lot of dancing and singing along, that's for sure. But keep in mind, we play the entirety of the Beethoven 7th Symphony. We are weaving in with it all of these songs of Beyonce, all these favorite kind of hit songs of hers. So the extraordinarily beautiful and heartbreaking second movement of the Beethoven 7th Symphony, which many people will recognize even though they might not know it by name, then gives way to the song Halo by Beyonce. Then it threads back to Beethoven. Then we have Daddy Lessons, then back to Beethoven. And we continually kind of oscillate between the two throughout the course of the evening.
I got to say, Steve, this sounds really exciting. And thank you so much for joining me to talk about it.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait. My hometown.
Well, welcome back. We're so glad to have you. Listeners can catch Beethoven Beyonce with the Chicago Philharmonic at the Harris Theater on Thursday, November 20th. And also, CityCast listeners are going to get 25% off tickets with the promo code CityCast. Just head to harristheaterchicago.org to grab yours before November 19th.
Before we get out of here, I want to give a huge heartfelt thank you to the people who make CityCast Chicago and Hey Chicago possible. Our executive producer is Simone Alicea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago newsletter editor is Emmy Mack. Our social media manager is Rick Homuth. The music we all love this week is from none other than Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop, and additional music this week from Taryn Ector, courtesy of Epidemic Sound. My last thank you, as it is every single week, every single episode, is for you. Thank you for making time for CityCast Chicago, for allowing, inviting, lifting up my voice, the voice of these producers, all of these amazing guests who come through. This show literally does not exist without you stopping by, making time, putting us on 2XP in the background. However you consume it, please keep doing it. Share us with your friends, your family, your entire communities. Like, come on. We trying to grow this thing, and that's not all on you, right? We're going to do our part. But, please go ahead and keep lifting us up. We appreciate you. We're going to be back bright and early next week. We'll talk to you then. Peace.